Okay, you know the drill. It's another episode of High Ticket Woman. And today in our expert corner, we have a really special guest. I know I say that all the time, but I've not had anybody on my podcast like this at all in the year and a half that I've been doing this. So I can't wait to really dive in with him. I've got with me Brian McFarland, and he is a 40 plus year sales professional. He works in digital media sales right now in the New York City area. And guess what, everybody? He is consistently ranked as the number one seller in the world. He has a podcast called Owning the Goal, which is designed to bring on guests from all areas of life to set goals and just discuss how to achieve those goals through hard work and smart strategies. He's been both an individual contributor in sales as well as a leader and builder of sales teams, all the way from startups to large corporations. Brands such as the Rolling Stone, Good Housekeeping, Country Home, Say Media, Digital Trends, and now I'm going to say this wrong, Oguri. He
Oh, agree. You got it.
Oguri. Woo! And he's sold over 250, is that million, Brian?
Yes.
Wow, that's $250 million in advertising revenue and partnerships. He's also the father of two teenagers. He was married for 13 years and divorced it, but now he's in the happiest relationship of he's ever been in with his life partner for over 2 years. He loves cats and fish his whole life. He plays music professionally, but now as a side gig. We call these people Renaissance men, everybody. Brian is a Renaissance man. He's played over 1,500 live performances, been in a band, signed up to an independent music label, recorded on 10 albums. He was also one of the top indoor cycling instructors in New York for 22 years, teaching over 2,500 classes and developing a consistent following across top gyms and facilities in the region. He is, of course, no surprise, a lifelong learner, constantly seeking to achieve the best version of himself and now use his crystallized intelligence to share with others. He also, in addition to all that, if that's not enough, he teaches a business of life course to high school students in New York now, and he volunteers with the High Poth Kids. You're gonna have to tell us about that one, Brian, in the city, helping students excel in learning STEM career opportunities as they head towards college. Brian, welcome to the High Ticket Woman.
My goodness. Thank you so much, Debbie. I'm like, who is this guy?
Right? When you hear all that back, you're like, did I really do all that? You made it. I mean, I'm bowled over. Like, I got to get busy and get on the stick, getting some stuff done. You had a lot in your lifetime.
And to finish and I did say to you just a minute ago, I'm not going to be an egoist, I think, on this. But the one thing I forgot to put in there, I do have to put in, but was one of my proudest achievements, and it's also a selling thing, is I at the age of 46, I started playing soccer and had never played soccer before. And within 10 years, I played one game in a semi-professional league,
Oh, okay.
because that was my goal of another goal of selling. So,
Okay, so everybody, there's a reason why I have Brian on here today, okay? Because Brian has tapped into something that has made, I'm not going to ask Brian how old he is, but Brian is
57.
okay, right? He's around my age. I'm 56. All right, now I'm really feeling like I'm behind the that's behind the eight ball. I mean, Brian, you have tapped into something that has really made your life pretty extraordinary. I want to ask you about being ranked number one in the world. I mean, imagine me having the number one sales, associate in the world on my podcast. I feel incredibly honored. How does one actually get ranked that way, just out of curiosity?
Sure. Well, first off, it goes without saying, thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely.
I mean, we met just a week ago, and my life partner and I are like, where does she live? Like, this would be the greatest double date ever. And unfortunately, from Texas to New York. But if you're ever in New York or we're in Texas, we could have a fabulous time. And we did a great episode. I'll definitely promote, and I'm getting great feedback on you. So I'm very, very grateful. But to answer your question directly, whenever I go, how it's measured, the direct answer to the question is it could either be measured on total revenue sold in a year or on growth year over year and or a combination of the both. So how I go into every sales job I've had is generally when you're hired as a salesperson, you take over. I was saying this to one of my bandmates last night. I said, when you go into a sales gig, you get the list that's on fire, basically, meaning it's either been mishandled, hasn't been touched, broken in some way, and you have to go and fix it. And if you can do that, you'll should be rewarded handsomely, or fired in a period of time if you don't.
One or the other.
So wherever I go, I'm handled like the dumpster fire of a list. And you're never really told exactly how bad the fire was, but I'm used to it. And you take pretty much zero and you turn it into something. So when I take a job, on my first day or before, I ask whoever is my superior and or my supervisor or coach and say, who is the best here? And they look at you and they're like, well, it's Gene Smith or it's John, you know, whoever. Why do you ask? And I said, well, what is it from your coaching perspective that makes them the best? What did they do different than everyone else that has made them the best? How long did it take them to get there? What was their list like when they got here? And I kind of grilled the coach to understand. And then I said, okay, well, and then they asked, well, why do you ask? And I said, well, it makes sense. If I'm going to learn from anybody, it's going to be from someone who's performing at the best. Because just so you know, I'm also going to let them know at the end of that conversation that I'm going to thank them for the information and that within 12 to 18 months, I'm going to beat them. And, but that it's done in a very eloquent way. So then I proceed and go meet with that person and have breakfast with them. And I just ask a lot of questions and ingratiate myself to them very humbly. And then many of them are 20 years younger than me, to be honest with you. Um, and they share, and I take notes and listen a lot. And they're pretty humbled, and especially ones that are like 20 years younger than me, they're kind of surprised. They're like, "Where's this guy going with this?" And then as we get to the end of the meal, I just say what I said to you, and I say, "Well, if it was you, I would say, well, listen, Debbie, thank you so much for sharing. I'm so thankful to be on the same team as you because we're gonna make each other better. And how I'm gonna help you be better, because you've already helped me be better, is I'm gonna challenge you because you're the best. And wherever I go, I need to be the best." And I get this kind of odd look, like, did I just give him all my secrets? And I know it's coming because I've done this repeatedly. And I said, so listen, I will share as much with you from my experiences as you just gave to me. So, and we're teammates. So the reason I feel this is a value exchange here and mutually beneficial is I'm going to push you and you're going to push me. And guess what? We're both going to be even better than we were. But in the end, I'm going to win because I'm going to come out on top. And they're like, and they're usually type A plus, otherwise they wouldn't be the best. And they're like, bring it on. And that starts this really wonderful relationship. And I'm their biggest cheerleader. They generally, it takes them a little bit of time because I don't think I've ever had anyone who ever was approached that way. I mean, and it's on my second day of work. And they're kind of shocked, but it works. Why wouldn't you ask the person? I've learned so much from you just by getting to know you, right? You're up to 80 something episodes. You've got a really big following. Like rising tides lift us both. So why wouldn't I want to learn from you? And you're a great person. So you want to share with me, because we're going to make each other better. So that's how you get to be, the best.
You're saying something really phenomenally different than what most people think of in terms of sales. And, to the listeners, there's a reason why I wanted Brian on this podcast, and we're gonna get to that. I don't want you sitting here going, "What does this have to do with marriage or relationships?" It has everything to do with those things. but you're gonna have to wait for it. So, Brian, let's come what jumped out at me when you were talking about that is the word humility, because you a you are you are seeking input from somebody who's already established at this company, who is the best at that point in the company, and you are elevating them in terms of asking them questions and picking their brain on what they do really well, but then you're also challenging them to be even better. How does this step away from the norm when it comes to because when I think of sales, well, I better take that back. I think of sales very differently than the average person, but I think the average person thinks of sales as being sleazy. So can you speak to that a little bit? Because this is a very different approach.
Yes. Well, and I told you I was going to do this, and you are taking on the homework assignment.
Yeah,
If it's if you're listening and not watching, I'm holding up what is my Guide to Life, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. I think it's up to at this point. This was published in I think the 40s or the 50s. He has since passed. His family still has the foundation. It's sold over, I think, 23 million copies of the book. So that very statement, right? How to win friends and influence people. The people I talked to early on in my career went, "Oh, with the arms folded, oh, that's teaching you how to scam people, or that's teaching you how to manipulate people." Um, which, to be honest, I don't. I'm at this point, I'm too old to be offended. Early on in my career, I was like, I kind of took offense to that. I'm like, first of all, I'm not here to manipulate anyone. Okay, the best sale is when this is whether it's your relationship, whether it's your soccer team, whether it's your podcast here, are when both parties feel as if they've won and that the person who is being sold, I never ever say I sold someone. I said what I did was I influenced someone to help them make a decision that was ultimately good for us both.
I love that.
For real, right? So whether it was, um, convincing my life partner that I'm now with, who you're gonna meet on Sunday, that she should be with me, to be honest. Um, and when I say convince, that's a strong word. It's influenced them a little bit because I'm willing to take the lead, and if it's right, right? If it's wrong, whether it's business or personal or anything like that, it's not going to be sustainable, right? You don't want to sell a one off. You don't want to go on one date. You want to build something. So, what this book and this way of selling, if you will, is it's taking so many things, but it's at its very core, Dale Carnegie, what he says in the beginning of this is, look, you could read this book in one of two ways. You can either read this book and it's like tricks and tips and gimmicks and things to do and remembers people's names and remember their birthdays and you can play all these games, right? And you know what? It'll probably work for you a little bit. But guess what? If you embrace this book and the ideas and concepts in it authentically as a human, right, and be vulnerable and be humble, you can build a career out of this and you can build lifelong relationships, business, sales, marriage, dating that will last for the rest of your life that both people will want to be in. And that's the way I embraced this book from when I was 16 years old when I read it for the first time.
So here's the thing, everybody. When I met Brian a week ago, because as he said, he interviewed me for his podcast, I never would have thought you were in sales, okay? Because you you have a completely different persona than we tend to associate with a salesperson. Brian, you resonated kindness and you were so complimentary towards me and what I was doing the things that I was saying, and my first impression of you, which is still there, is what a nice man, right? So, how did you I mean, it's interesting to me, you being the number one salesperson in the world, you obviously aren't pushy. You're not demanding in the way that you come across. So what is it? Yeah, you're shaking your head no for listeners. What is it about you that you think is different than how people tend to perceive salespeople?
Okay, that's a great question. And first of all, thank you for the compliments back.
Welcome.
Um, no, I really appreciate it. Well, I didn't used to be such a great person.
Mhm.
I said I read this book for the first time when I was 16 years old, and I'll try and be brief and tell the story of how this book changed my life. So I grew up in a wonderful family in Long Island, New York, and but I grew up very, very assertive, a tremendous amount of energy inside me. I'm a big kid, and back in the day when you grew up, like therapy was like going to a witch doctor, right? Not just in my family, but for anybody. Nobody went to therapy. There was no, I don't even know if there was psychiatry or psychology. I'm sure there was, but that wasn't anything you would do. And it was also unaffordable. So at that point, I take this on myself when I would have stress or anything, or someone would treat me badly, or I was bullied as a kid because I was kind of heavy, um, I would just internalize it all and I wouldn't tell anyone. Right. So I had this like rage and anger bubble building up inside me. And then I got a paper route when I was 13 years old. And I tell the story that I was delivering papers at like 6 o'clock in the morning. And it was like all the things I'm passionate about: waking up early, riding my bike, being the first one to see the sunshine and being empowered by that and feeling like I got to jump on the day. And I also I saw that sales thing ticked off in my head instantly because I was delivering like, let's say 20 papers on my route. But every time I'd deliver a paper, I'd pass three houses that I wasn't delivering a paper to. And it clicked on my life. I'm like, it would take just the same amount of time if I sold those three houses too, so I could develop the route. Right. But this aggressive nature in me. So I played tons of sports. I'm getting to the answer here. So when I played sports, if somebody pushed me, I pushed them 10 times as hard back. Um, really was a little out of my element. I never struck anyone in anger. I never will. But I had this rage.
Yeah.
So I was not a very nice person because I could not figure out what was going on. And as a therapist, right, unless you let this stuff out, it's going to be hard and it's going to manifest itself in other ways. So I was basically playing myself off the basketball team because I was getting in fights and physical things with my own teammates. If we'd play another team and anyone did anything, I was like, whatever. So my coach pulls me aside, and what turned me in, long-winded answer to your question, what turned me into the kind, non-pushy, literally, person I am today is my basketball coach asked me to meet him at his house, which he didn't do with anyone. So I rode my bike to his house and we sat down on his back porch. I remember the conversation like it was yesterday. His name was Ozzie Stewart, and he changed my life because he had the paperback version of the book. And he said, listen, man, you got a lot of talent. You're not Michael Jordan, whatever. You're not going to play at that level, but you're a big kid. You got energy. You're assertive. You train hard, whatever. He goes, but your head, it's not serving you well, and you're not representing the team well, and you're not a good teammate. And quite honestly, you're kind of coming across as a jerk. So I want to help you. And the way I can help you is I need you to read this book. And you're going to read it over the summer before senior year at that point, or junior year. And each chapter you get through, you're going to write me a report on what that chapter meant to you. And he goes, by the end of the book, you're going to be a different person. If you adapt and truly develop an authentic passion for the things in this book about caring about other people more than you care to a degree about yourself. So that flipped the switch where when someone would then do something to me, It's kind of like Mel Robbins who does the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 countdown. Instead of reacting, I would think about it and try and process that situation from the other person's perspective in a short period of time, and then say, you know what, take the high road. Maybe there's a reason that somebody cut you off in traffic. So you shouldn't road rage them. Maybe they're going to the hospital to visit somebody else. So be a kinder, gentler, more thoughtful person, period. Check your ego at the door and your whole world will open up. So it it gets back to, it just helped me be the best version of myself I could ever be. And by the way, you need to, when I say you need to reread the book tells you you need to go through it every year and you read each chapter and then you think about it and then you read it again. I gave this book to my girlfriend who had never sold in her life. And she said the same thing. She's like, that's kind of like a scam book, right? And I'm like, it's not a scam book. It's just about understanding human nature and understanding what other people want.
So let's apply this whole concept then to, because people might think, well, that's great if I want to go into sales as a career, but I don't. I want, nothing to do with sales. But I always say, and you and I were having a conversation about that earlier, I always say everybody's in sales. And you just don't know it. I mean, and so I suppose in one way you could say that you were selling something on the basketball court with your anger. Yeah, you're not. So can you speak to that concept? Because I know you were agreeing with me earlier when we were talking about this whole idea that everybody's in sales.
Yeah. Um, well, I'll give you a great anecdote. Is so when I went to my life partner, she's the executive director of the company you mentioned. It's called Helpatha Kids. And what it does is it helps kids who are underrepresented in the New York area get into STEM, which is such an important area for our country. Um, so I went to teach and I developed for them a course. Obviously, I do it philanthropically, called The Business of Life. And my opening slide is the following. First off, I go in and I'm a big gift giver, as you'll get a book from me in the mail, and I'm a big card writer. So before they got into the classroom, on everyone's chair, I had given them um, I had written a handwritten card to their name and thanked them for coming to the class, even before they got there. I gave them a pen, some mints. I'm always on giving mints because you give somebody mints, like it's like they constantly are going in there and they're having something. And so they all had something from me, right? Yeah. And they all sit down, they're like 16, 17 years old. And I'm like, so I go on, I'm like poking fun of myself. I'm like, all right, so who's this old guy? He's 50 years older than me, 40 years older than me. And what do I have to learn from them? And I said, all right, so I have one question. I clicked the slide. I'm like, who in this room wants to go into sales? Not one person raised their hand, which is the exact answer I wanted. I said, okay, now the question, who in this room is in sales? Not one person. And I said, okay, I'm going to give you one more chance. I don't want to say you're all wrong because I hate saying the word wrong, but think a little deeper. I'm going to ask you one more time. Who in this room is in sales? And they all looked at each other and they knew they should raise their hand. So they all raised their hand. And I said, exactly. Exactly. I said, every moment of your life when you had to go downstairs to Columbia and you had to get in the door, you had to sell the person who was sitting behind the desk on taking your ID and letting them go in the door, right? If you were mean to them, they can maybe stop you from doing it. So I've just sold you on your listening to me without you knowing it. And it goes back to my favorite quote ever was from Maya Angelou. People will forget what you say, people will forget what you hear, but they will never forget how you made them feel. Right. So in sales, it's all about, I just got chills up my spine. How can you make somebody feel? Because if you're doing it authentically, then they will be open to coming to an agreement on whatever you're trying to quote unquote sell them. So whether it's your relationship or your life partner, whether it's your child and you're trying to get them, motivate them to do something, Whether it's your auto mechanic, you're trying to fix your car for a fair price, you're always selling in every moment of your life. And when you understand that and realize we're all in sales, it just makes your life so much better, and it makes the people around you really like you and want to be around you because you're always thinking of what's in it for them that I can bring to them.
That's such a a phenomenal way to look at life, and it really is contrasted by what most people do. Most people are very self-absorbed, I find. And, just in the day to day, right? When you're at the grocery store and a person's standing in the middle of the aisle and they're completely unaware that other people need to go around them, right? Or I'm at the gym and I'm running around the indoor track and, you know, runners are supposed to stay to the right and walkers are supposed to stay to the left. And here you've got somebody who's just hogging the middle of the, mo- you know, hogging the middle of the running track, right? I think so much of the time what we see is people, whether they're consciously doing it or not, they aren't thinking about other people. They are wrapped up in their own little world. And yet we are all advertising something. I like to say we're a walking billboard for something. So whether you realize it or not, you're selling something. So what are you selling? And whether you, again, if whether you like that or not, if you understand this, then you can get really intentional about what you are actually selling.
100%. And I love your use. Is quickly becoming. I interviewed a gentleman yesterday who runs a company that helps with management consulting for culture. And his number one word he used through the entire interview was intentionality,
Yeah.
and truly, truly being intentional. So, for example, when I go to see my life partner tonight, I'm thinking of how can I be intentional with making this the best night we could possibly have, right?
Mm,
Because every day is a gift. We're not
mm.
promised that we're waking up tomorrow. And I'm not walking in the door selling her in terms of the way people look at salespeople, but in a way I am, right? I'm walking in the door with, we talked a little bit about earlier, with good body language, right? Having my hands open, wanting to give her a really nice kiss, wanting to give her a hug, expressing interest in what happened in her day, right? That's all sales. Um,
Yes.
when you embody it, it just comes naturally, but it's what I wanna do, and I think the way that most people should be. They'd have a better life if they were that way. Um, but how does it feel, like, flip the switch? How does it feel on the other end when your husband comes home and he treats you that way? You sound like you have this unbelievable marriage and your husband's such a wonderful man, right? He treats you that way. He reaches down and grabs your hand when you go for your long walks, through the woods. Besides just telling you he loves you, right? He mows the lawn when you don't ask him to, right? It's those sort of things. And all those things I could say are selling in some way because he cares about you, so he wants to make you feel great about yourself. So it's really just realize by putting yourself not second, but by placing the other person at the utmost of importance to you, it's going to lift you both up.
Yeah, I love what you said earlier about bo both parties need to feel that they've won. I wanna take this even a step further because I think that I think we're selling from the moment we wake up in the morning and decide what attitude to put on, what clothes to put on, what y you know, you get in your car and you decide, am I putting music on or a podcast on or if, driving in silence. All of those things are intentional choices that shape your mood, and the way you're gonna show up. And you are communicating even in that. Like, I'll tell a story on me very, very quickly because this is really all about you, but I think it really illustrates this point. I used to teach a class, at a community college called Freshman Success, and On the first day of one of the first classes I ever taught, I had a small group of students, and one of them, I'm telling on myself now when they say this, he wore a leather jacket, he had a chain going from, like, his jacket to his wrist, and he had long hair, and I don't know if he had tattoos or not, but my first impression of him was, "Oh, he's gonna be a problem." He was one of the best students I had. He was a phenomenal student, but that first impression was shaped by what I saw, and that is also part of sales, is it not?
100%,
Yeah.
right? Because if you had that kid back, right? Um, and I've done this with my kids. My life partner does this with me because honestly, I'm like her doll. I'm not very good at dressing. Pretty much all the clothes I own, since we started dating, she bought. And honestly, because I showed up and she even talks about in our first podcast, one of our first podcasts, she saw like I wore too big clothes. And even though I had ironed my shirt, it was like the first shirt I had ironed in like 3 years, because I was so excited for this date. But like, I just wasn't, I'm not a good dresser, I'm just not. And I acknowledge that. So, through my life, like when you're talking about how you're presenting yourself, I know for a fact, my my former wife, she also dressed me, and I can say I was much more successful, when I've had someone who's helped me with that, right? Because they're like, what do they say? Clothes make the man, right? Clothes also make the woman. Um, and I didn't get that, but then all of a sudden, when I had people who were helping me dress and present myself in a fashionable way, um, I it was subtle, but I started to notice changes because I had all the confidence in the world. I had the body language, I'd studied all this other stuff. But if you have an inappropriate outfit or colors that don't match and whatever, it's like hard for people to see through that. So getting back to the kid you saw in school, if you were able to, now he had that. Well, what if you were able to get to him and say, look, I love your individuality. Absolutely. However, are you aware that the fact that with what you're wearing, you're portraying a certain type of image, right or wrong, but you are portraying a certain type of image that is putting you in a silo, right? When I hear that, it's like, oh, he probably plays handball. He might use substances he shouldn't be using. He's gonna act out, right? He may have problems at home. This is cookie cutter.
I not like authority figures. Right.
The kids in my school, there was one kid who I'll never forget. His name was Nicky. I won't give his last name. He dressed like that. He was a problem,
Yeah.
but guess what? He was the nicest kid in the world. And because he had challenges at home, he put on this front, right, with all this stuff. And then I got to be friends with him. And I was like, Nicky, like, you're so nice. Like, oh my God. And if you think about it, if that kid had worn like what we're wearing, nobody would have ever thought of him that way. So it does the way you represent yourself, duh, makes total sense into what image are you trying to portray? And are you maximizing your ability to portray, that image that you want to represent?
Even posture. Posture, it plays such a big role in this too. My husband, when I first started dating him, he was kind of more like sort of stooped over, and, I think we get in these posture habits, but, I would always sort of like just press his shoulders back and say, "Honey, just just stand back." Because even posture can convey confidence or a lack of confidence. And that people may not consciously know why they're forming an impression about you, but at a glance, they feel like they know a lot, even if they can't specifically pinpoint what those things are right away.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. When I coached those young people in that class, I did a whole thing. I did so much with them, but one piece was on presentation skills. Like I've worked on this my whole life because I've worked, we are all the collections. I think we talked a little bit about this, about, you know, I wasn't born this way, right? I just happen to have, including my parents, a lot of great teachers, a lot of great mentors. I made myself vulnerable and I saw how great they were. And I was like, can you help me? Can you teach me? Because A, there's a value exchange here as a seller. If you teach me to be a better seller, I'll make you more money, right? I'll be a better employee. I'll be less of a hassle to you, right? So there's a good value exchange there. And what one of the great ones taught me, and to this day, so when you're presenting, I would ask the kids, I shot up 3 different pictures of like presenters with a screen. And I said, which side of the screen you should be on? And they're like, doesn't matter. I'm like, okay, which way do you read? They're like, left to right. I'm like, so if I'm on the other side of the screen, then the viewer is forced to start over here, but they go off your mouth, right? So I'm pointing to the other side of the screen if someone's listening to this. And then they hear what you say, and then they have to go back to the other side of the screen and then read. It's like, it's all discombobulated. But if they can look at me first, get the audio, then follow my hand onto the screen, and then they can read. How much easier does it make them, right? We always say in sales, don't sell anyone, make it easy for them to buy. That's in life, in your relationship. Make it easy for the partner to want to be with you, whether it's the first date, if you've been married for, decades. Um, so things that I always tell people, and I tell these kids, first off, when you're talking to someone, make sure your heart is exactly in line with their heart. Right? If I cross my arms, what did I just do? I have completely communicated to you. I am not interested in what you're saying. I'm actually possibly angry at you. And right. And your hands crossed is fine. It's really up in the chest area because if I'm getting out there, I apologize, but this is the way I live my life. Your heart is radiating energy, right?
Yeah.
And it's for me, I'm trying at always being loving, positive energy. If I block that, I'm not able to radiate that energy, and I'm also not able to receive your energy. So if I'm talking to you and I can present to 5 people, I can present to 500 people, wherever I'm trying to direct my positive energy. If you watch me present, you will see me lightly rotate, not move too much, and do a whole like dance move up there, but to direct the flow of energy toward that person and then sometimes step into them a little bit, right? Proximity to the person you're talking to is critical. Early on in my career, I was a little bit of a close talker, and I thought I was being more authentic and engaging by coming up on you. But I realized when one friend said to me, I was watching that from afar. I was a coach. He's like, you were roughly about 12 to 14 inches away from them. And I could see they visibly took somewhat of a slight step back.
Yeah.
Right? So just like in dating, if you move in too quickly, and I'm not saying to like kiss or whatever, you push the other person away. So you've got to fine tune the approach of what is the correct distance, body language to actually speak to someone, what's too close, what's too far. How do you shake somebody's hand? There's so much involved.
You're talking about mirroring in a way. We use this term in therapy. You're paying attention to the other person so that you can mirror and match them in terms of body position and energy and facial expression and tone and yeah.
All of it. And you and I talked the other day about when you're in a disagreement, especially with a partner, this is with a partner, not a business situation, right? Just the simple act of being close to them and touching them, not in a romantic or an emotional way, um, that changes everything, right? There's no raising of voices. There's no like you're looking at each other. You're not going like this. All those things. I look and when I coach salespeople, I say, you know what? One of my greatest challenges is that I absolutely love there's too many salespeople in this world, and there's too few buyers in my world. So most sellers, most buyers, when you walk in the room, sometimes they feel like they had to take the meeting. So I actually love when I walk in and a buyer's sitting like this.
With their arms crossed.
Yeah, with their arms crossed.
Well, you know how I typically feel as a buyer, like if I know I'm coming on a sales call, I feel guarded. I feel like, okay, I have to be on my guard because otherwise I'm going to get trapped into, answering questions in a way that if I don't buy, they're going to sort of shame me or guilt me or make me feel stupid. So I feel guarded coming into a situation like that.
Right. And if you do the body, if you cross anything, I
Yeah.
actually welcome that as an opportunity to get them uncrossed, because I hate to talk like wins and losses. That's a win for us both, because that's one of my, and I coach when I coach salespeople, and I'm like, bring me to the person who's going to do that, because I guarantee you within 5 minutes, I will get those arms uncrossed. I just will. And I'm gonna make them want to be in the conversation because I made them feel comfortable. I made them feel like I'm not gonna sell them anything. I'm
Mm.
not aggressive. And all of a sudden, when you see, it's such a joy when you see someone go like this and then lean in. And what I did, if any of you're just listening, is I just uncrossed my arms and I opened up my heart and I leaned into the conversation. And that was just because the person on the other side showed a genuine interest in me
Yeah.
and is looking to provide me some value.
So let's really now narrow this down and apply this to, so many of our listeners' situations where they're in a relationship, married or unmarried, but it's not going well. There's been damage, right? And our first tendency is to do what you've been talking about, to close ourselves off, to really guard against being hurt again. And yet, so much of the time when we do that, we are communicating, we are selling a certain message that is going to make it so much more difficult to mend and repair this relationship. Let's Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, this is probably one of the toughest parts of your job, right? Somebody has got to take the lead
Yeah.
and be, when I say the bigger person, I don't mean in the way of you're elevating your status. That's not the point. This is my own relationship management, that I can only speak to for myself. Is I generally know, and I don't know if it's because it's the man or whatever. It doesn't matter, right? I'm not, um, first off, I probably make the most mistakes. So it's usually more often that it's my fault that something has went awry. Um, so I also then realize that I have responsibility to to be the initiator of the reconciliation. I also, I'm going to talk to my therapist later. I talk to a therapist once a week. I love therapy. And I specifically choose female therapists, 100% truth, because I find them to be gentler, kinder, more sophisticated in their approach. And women understand women better, right? And my partner is a woman. So I go into the situation, and trust me, my partner, I've walked in the door and she's had her arms crossed many times with valid reason. And I realize I need to walk into that situation, not, I need to walk in the opposite of the way that she is. Right. So if I walk in with my arms crossed, guess what? If you're coaching us, you're like, you guys aren't going to get anywhere. Right. You're just two people just banging into each other. If one person doesn't acquiesce, and it's not an ego thing. It's just like, if you want to be with somebody, what's the big deal about just checking your ego out the door, right? You both win in the end if you go to sleep that night happy with each other. So what? I mean, I said to my therapist the other day, I was like, oh, I feel like sometimes, and I said this to Marie, so I'm not just speaking out of school. I said, sometimes I feel like I'm the one doing it more. And you know what she said to me? So what? Are you keeping score? Like, so what? And then followed up with, "Do you make more mistakes to throw off more?" I'm like, "Yes." She said, "So you should be the one doing it." But it's just, something's got to give, right? Two people, like two trains going into each other. Like one's got to say, "Oh, I'm going to choose your book, right? The path less traveled, and choose that." So I think that's to a listener. It's somebody check your ego out the door and realize for the greater good of your relationship.
I love that. Check your ego at the door. I mean, these are things I think we all know, um, but we start to make excuses, when our partner is doing something that we don't like or is hurtful. We begin to use that as the justification for us shutting down. As we wrap up here, Brian, I guess what I want the listeners to hear is you whether we use the verbiage of "you are in sales" or we say, "Look, you're communicating something all the time," it's the same thing. That's what Brian is really essentially saying. That's what Dale Carnegie is talking about in his book, How to Win Friends. Who doesn't want more friends, whether that's, making a friend of your partner or expanding your friendship group and influencing people. And by the way, we all are influenced and influence people on any given day. Anytime you get somebody to do something that you want them to do, that you've influenced them, gently or or not so gently. You get your teenager to take out the trash and they roll their eyes, but they take it out. You've influenced them to take out the trash. But when it comes to your marriage, i- it's very, very important that you stop and do what Brian is saying and go, okay, what am I communicating? What am I selling to my partner that says, "I wanna be here. I care about myself. I care about my boundaries. I care about my self-respect, and and so should you." Brian, if you were gonna just leave our listeners with one final, you know, gem of advice here, what would that be?
Wow. I was thinking about this before because we both end our shows the same way. And it's so difficult. When we interview people, we say, "What's the one thing?" And they proceed
What's
to
the
take
one
out a
thing?
list of 700 things. Out of it is that in the end, um, always showing and remembering the one word I haven't used much in this conversation is gratitude.
Ah, yes.
And where I'm going to go with this very, very quickly in closing is I remember when I started dating my life partner now, it was within a couple weeks. I wrote out a sheet just on my own of it must have been 50 things I was grateful about her. And I still have it. So that when there's a time when we're not in alignment and I'm upset or whatever, I go and I take those pieces of paper out and I look at them and after I read them and I go, What what are you doing? Look at all the things you have to be grateful for that you're with this person and look how they make you both better people. Is it really worth, arguing over the change in the whatever it is, like the symbolism? So just be grateful. You know, period. Gary Vaynerchuk, the social media guru, said our chances of being born as a human is like 1 trillion to 1. So you and I, anyone on this planet would trade places with us in 1 second. So just be grateful for that and be grateful for the relationship you're in. Be grateful for the life that you have. And if you do that, to me, nothing else seems like the problem that you think it is.
It's amazing what an attitude shifter gratitude is. There's probably a more poetic way to say that. I'll have to think about that. But yeah, it is a huge attitude shifter. And excellent, excellent advice. Brian, I this hour has gone I think we've gone longer than I typically run my interviews. And that's because I've just been so fascinated by this conversation. Thank you so much. It's what an honor to tap the brain of somebody who is literally the number one salesperson in the world. That's phenomenal. And what's so cool about doing these interviews is I get to meet incredible people like you, Ryan. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Everybody, unfortunately, this has come to an end. This is the end of today's episode. And as always, I will put in the show notes how to get a hold of Brian. I know your website is owningthegoal.com, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, and then, I'll put, the link to your podcast in there as well. Everybody, thank you so much for tuning into the High Ticket Woman today. As I always say, if something today really resonated with you, if you recognize that the message that you are communicating to your partner, that you are selling in the way that you talk, in the way that you don't talk, in the way that you treat yourself. Have you let yourself go? Have you stopped caring about yourself? Whatever it is, maybe it's time to act because remember, it's never too late to heal. It's never too late to turn things around. Growth never ends until the moment we are no longer on this earth, but only if you're willing to do the work. And that's what my 6-month intensive marriage recovery program is all about, to take the next step towards strengthening your relationship and not just your relationship, but within your life. Reach out to me, debbiecottle.com, schedule a free call. You don't have anything to lose by doing that. So reach out to me. And don't forget, please subscribe, share this with a friend, and always stay committed to becoming all God designed you to be.